into whoever's going to be. But they're all going to be standing up, looking at the piece ticket so they can wave. They can't see. Yeah, they'll be sitting. As soon as they sit down, that's when we'll get started. I'll look at them one more time.
You guys ready? You feel good? Yes. Okay. Thank you, darling.
How are you?
Okay.
Do a great job. I know you will. Let's go. You guys got it.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. I'll try it again because I need the call and response. But good morning, good morning, good morning. Thank you. And as I always start these mornings that I'm super excited about, I want you on the count of three, everyone under the sound of my voice, to say yes. 1, 2, 3. I need the people at the Palais to hear you, so I need it to be louder and better and stronger. On the count of three, I need everyone under the sound of my voice to say yes. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Now, I normally say, let me tell you what you've agreed to, but I won't do that today. Today, I'm going to say, I do that because I want you to get used to saying yes. There's so much power when you say yes. You give yourself power. You give the people around you power. You open up so many possibilities to do amazing things. So I feel like I want you to do it one more time. On the count of three, I want everyone under the sound of my voice to say yes. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. A great example of people who have constantly said yes to the mission and moment of what we do is this client here on stage with me right now, Procter & Gamble. Please give them a round of applause. My name is Adrienne C. Smith. I am the founder of the Can Diversity Collective in Inkwell Beach. Shout out to our 5 years of activation. We are so excited to be here on day 4. This is history making that you're seeing here. We're making history by changing the look and feel of what Cannes Lions looks like. They're celebrating their 70th year. I'm sure they've never seen anything like they've seen on the Croisette in Cannes in 2023. But we plan on making this a regular occasion, a space that's full of inclusion, energy, creativity that's inspiring the world. I always want to tell the story about the partnership, and today's theme is the power of partnerships within our larger theme of expect the unexpected, moving from the woe is me of DE&I to the wow is me, moving from woe to wow. And Procter & Gamble has been one of those partners that have helped us to change the trajectory of what people think about DE&I and how you put it into action. And you've constantly challenged us to do that, and we thank you again for your partnership. Just a little story. So last year, Mark challenged us to do more than, let's just not host a panel, and they always blow the roof off when they're here. So, just the power of what Procter & Gamble can do. Let's just not do a panel. Let's create opportunities to not just put it in action. And we were able to bring 5 young creatives that Procter & Gamble sponsored for us to do a creative campaign We gave them 3 case studies or creative briefs. One was My Black is Beautiful, the other was Pampers, and the other one was Crest. And when I tell you these young people did a campaign, and the time and attention to detail to viewing these campaigns, Mark and Damon and Eric and Igami Consulting and DDB and a lot of agencies were on the call for 3 hours. Do you hear me when I say 3 hours to capture the attention on a Zoom of watching very intently to presentations. And the presentations were so great, we thought we were going to give a winner the opportunity to attend the Dubai Links Festival in March. But Mark Pritchard, you know, in his generous way, said, Adrienne, these presentations are so amazing that we think everyone should go to Dubai to experience the Dubai Links program. And I said, you know, Mark, well, we only prepared for one. And he says, you know what, Adrienne, I think you'll figure it out and everyone will get to go to Dubai. So we really, yeah. So it was literally like one of those Oprah Winfrey moments. You get a car, you get a car. So it's like, you go to Dubai, you go to Dubai. Everybody goes to Dubai. So thank you for that opportunity. And those young people, when they got to Dubai, showed up and showed out and represented us very well. We also had an opportunity to present for the first time on the Dubai Links stage a conversation about the power of what inclusion means. So I thank Damon, who is my partner there on stage. We made history in Dubai. We will continue to make history because the power of inclusion, the power of partnerships is so strong, and the world needs to know how to do it and how we operate it. So I'm so grateful for the partnership of helping us lead the way. Eric was there with us, standing court, holding court, making sure that we were on task and our messaging was great. Again, we cannot thank you enough for that partnership. So on that note, I'm going to step away and let you guys hear what you were meant to hear, which is this presentation from Procter & Gamble. Thank you guys for this partnership, and please enjoy our day of partnerships, the power of partnerships. Thank you.
There were always plenty of reasons to say no, to let someone else do the hard work. At P&G, we said, if not us, who? If not now, when? So we made a declaration that we were going to be the #1 company for Black employees and the #1 company for Black consumers. Part of this journey involved acknowledging the broader issues affecting Black Americans' lives. Racial inequality didn't begin with us, but it can end with us if we choose to act. P&G decided that we have an important role to play by not staying silent and by taking on the important issues of bias, inequality, inaccurate portrayal, and economic inclusion, which led us to the talk in 2017, and then the look in 2019, and the choice in 2020. This creative was coming from a place where marketers in America hadn't been before. Not everyone was ready for it, but many were, particularly after the events that inspired a social justice movement.
We won't be minimized. Maximize us.
As one of the world's largest advertisers, we're also committed to taking a holistic approach to build a more equal and inclusive creative and media supply chain, so Black Americans finally see themselves accurately portrayed on screen, and there's true inclusion at all levels where that work comes to life. It's why we launched Widen the Screen, our content creation, talent development, and partnership platform that is increasing representation and inclusion in advertising, film, and media, and better serving all people. Widen the Screen includes the Queen Collective, our partnership with Queen Latifah, Flavor Unit Entertainment, and Tribeca Studios, focused on emerging Black women directors and their crews, as well as 846, another partnership with Saturday Morning to create short, scripted films, stories of love, joy, beauty, and resilience, all told in an 8-minute and 46-second time frame, reclaiming the time it took to take a Black man's life, while providing creative opportunities for more Black creators, as well as content opportunities for Black-owned and operated media. Within this world of Black-owned and operated media, we've doubled spending each year for the past 2 years, and our aspiration is to double again. Throughout this journey, we've learned that if you take out the if and only ask your team how, you can break down a lot of the doubt that might hold you back. Never be apologetic about championing your brands to be inclusive. It's not just about doing good, it's about driving growth, because this is where P&G's business is growing, in the direction of serving all consumers fully. So connect through truth, capture your audience with authenticity, so everyone can say, "You see me, you get me," and then bring all communities along for the journey.
Good morning, everyone. We are incredibly proud of the body of work that you just saw here on screen. And frankly, looking back on it, it all seems so simple. Be bold, be creative, speak the truth, just tell it like it needs to be, and people will come along and understand it. It didn't exactly go down that way, right? The journey was anything but simple and easy, and candidly, it's anything but over. But I'm proud that we started. I'm proud that we persevered in the face of people who didn't think that we should be having that conversation. And I'm incredibly proud of my colleagues who stand on stage with me today because they are critical components to this journey. Today, our hope is to go deeper and talk about the enduring lessons that drove this work and candidly share some practical tips so that you can join us on that journey. We'll talk about what we got right. We'll talk about what we didn't get right. And we'll talk about the insights that will lead us to do that work today, particularly in an environment where people don't think inclusion is good business. We still believe inclusion is good business. My name is Damon Jones. I'm proud to serve as P&G's Chief Communications Officer. Let me introduce my colleagues. Leela Coffey, who heads our Multicultural Business Acceleration Team. Eric Austin from our Global Media Innovation Team. Andrea Wilkerson, who leads our Analytics and Insights business for our Global Skin and Personal Care, and our good friend who needs no introduction, Mark Pritchard. His official title is Chief Brand Officer. I also like to call him, though, Champion-in-Chief of what it is that we're doing. So thank you for joining us today. Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Damon. And thank you all for spending time here and for joining me and my colleagues who are about to tell you a story. And by the way, it wasn't just these colleagues, it's many more, many of whom are in the audience. So it was 2016, and we were not winning on several fronts. We were making some business interventions on an overall basis across our entire company, but it was clear that many of our brands were not growing with black consumers, nor multicultural consumers in general. Some brands were actually declining. The data was clear. It was inescapable. We weren't winning with black employees either. We had challenges in recruiting, retention, promotion, and satisfaction. Now, the data was clear and inescapable, but our black employees also told us. They told leadership, they told me directly that they didn't have the confidence that we were serious about winning with them or the consumers that looked like them. That cut deep to the core. That was a gut punch. After all, I was the executive sponsor of our African Ancestry Employee Resource Group, so I felt responsible. I had had previous successful experiences with black employees and multicultural consumers at different times during my career, so I mistakenly thought we were doing okay. But it became very obvious that what we were doing at the time was definitely not enough. So the journey we began wasn't an academic one. It was personal. We had to find a way to close the business gaps. We had to find a way to regain the confidence of the people in our company. We had to find a way to find new partners and build new capabilities and build new habits and ways of operating if we were going to solve these problems. We needed commitment, and we also needed the courage of our convictions. And we needed consistent and persistent action for immediate and lasting systemic change. We call this often the ground game. You got to be at it every single day, on the ground, making things happen. Now, we had to do all of this with a storm that was raging all around us externally. It was a profound moment on many levels for the company, for our leadership, and for me personally. It was a big wake-up call. So today we're going to talk about 3 aspects of our work that will hopefully be useful to you to apply in your business. Our job is to convey this to you, to join us, to learn, to apply to your business. 3 things. Number 1, inside the company, where we took deliberate action to improve the diversity of our organization at every level. Fundamental to serve diverse consumers, but also openly address bias and inequities in order to normalize the conversation about equality and inclusion, and step up on our responsibility as a leading employer. Outside the company, where we invested to learn, openly invite input, openly invite critique, and openly invite help, and evolve our approach to serve Black consumers to meet their unique needs. Both as a company, we needed to do that, and we needed to do that on every brand that we operated with. And third, system-wide throughout the industry, because we recognized early on that the system isn't broken, the system is built this way. It was built for a different context. It was built for the majority. It was not built to do the work we had to do. So we had to forge strategic partnerships so we could take meaningful action that is leading to lasting systemic change over time, to drive business growth on our brands and in the entire market by advancing equality and inclusion in the creative and media ecosystem. This is not inclusion for inclusion's sake. It's not an effort that's a side project or a corporate effort that's separate from the main business. We view inclusive, multicultural brand building as mainstream, built in, not bolted on. We view inclusion as necessary to serve all people and each person. And it's essential to fuel business growth and advance equality and improve the employee experience and grow the entire market and drive economic prosperity so we can strengthen our entire industry. Over to you.
All right, great. So going back to that, thank you, Mark. So it's interesting that Mark talked about that because we had been on a journey, and like you said, we thought we were getting some things right? So we had our Black ERGs, we had the Black History Month events, we even had Black people in our advertising, right? And we thought that was pretty good. But it wasn't lasting with impact, right? And so everything that we needed to do is we asked ourselves the question, what is landing with impact? And despite all of that activity, when it came to truly understanding the lived experiences of our Black employees, frankly, it wasn't there. It was still superficial. And candidly, I can tell you as a Black man within the company, when you looked in the rooms and where where the decisions were being made, there were still too far of us. So Mark talked about that intervention in 2016, right? One of the first things we did is we had to get everyone on the same page. So we had a company-wide webcast. We called this our Stepping Up Day. Stepping Up to Win. And our CEO hosted an all-employee webcast that basically said, we as a company are going after some new goals. And this just wasn't something that was done for the Black people or the people in marketing or whatever it is, everyone in the company. And he declared 2 bold ambitions, right? Number 1, we're gonna be the best company for Black employees. And number 2, we're gonna be the best company for Black consumers, right? He shared the data on household penetration gaps, all of that stuff that we needed to do, both on the employees and on the business, and said we, as you guys know at P&G, we're slightly competitive. We don't like to be good, we like to be number 1, right? So we put the data out there, right? And it was a clear and compelling story that we really needed to do that. All righty. So again, those 2 bold goals as we move to the next slide. Number 1, be number 1 for the company, number 1 for Black employees, and we talked about the interdependence of that. You can't do one without the other. And as Mark said, these were not D&I goals or E&I goals or DE&I goals, whatever you want to call them. They were business goals. We talked about a $1 billion opportunity that if we closed our share gaps, right, that allowed us to bring everyone on the same page, right? And so why this was a seminal moment is it gave everyone cover to ask the question, hey, does this work for multicultural consumers, right? If David, as our CEO, can talk about it, then everyone in the company could be able to do it, right? So it wasn't just a conversation that people needed permission or felt uncomfortable raising. Everyone had cover. Number 2, we made winning in this space everyone's job. So everyone who was a manager of others in the company now had a job to do was to ensure the success of their multicultural employees. Everyone who was running a business had a job to do, was to ensure the success of their multicultural consumers, right? All brands, all companies, all departments, right? So to take us further into that first step of that learning journey, I'm going to turn it over to Andrea Wilkerson.
Thanks, Damon. So this brings us to our very first lesson. We had to look at the hard data really hard, both from a qualitative perspective when we did employee sensing, but also from a quantitative perspective. And what the trends told us is that it illustrated we had specific issues and opportunities inside the walls of P&G. We transparently shared this data to understand across all employees, both from a gender lens, a ethnicity lens, to understand representation, advancement, and attrition, and the gaps that existed between all of those groups. And it was quite illuminating and quite humbling. While we had made good progress on representation, Black people were simply not getting promoted as fast as their white counterparts. And we had to understand why. We didn't stop with the data at a company level. We broke it down to all subparts of the organization and the business, and we made sure that the entire organization was responsible for getting to solutions. And this led to some hard conversations because the data didn't lie. But it ultimately led to great conversations, courageous conversations to drive action. This validated a belief that shortcomings in the representation and inclusion were directly tied to not winning externally with consumers. Many times at P&G, we talked about cultural familiarity, but we didn't really have the right language around that, and it wasn't always clear what we meant. So we gave voice to our Black employees who were deeply affected and frustrated by everything that was happening around the country at the time with the social unrest. We had to talk about the reality of being Black in America and how it manifested itself inside the walls of P&G. So this required us to create a safe space for people who were afraid of making a mistake and sometimes saying the wrong thing. But these conversations and this dialogue really helped to create an openness to build trust. We made a point earlier that multicultural is not a job for the few, but the many. We had to build inclusion into the business with accountability. The downside of a specialized capability is that multicultural marketing became someone else's job. Few people were motivated, let alone accountable for the results. And it became a special project versus something that people actually saw as a route to win. So within P&G, if we go back some years, we tried this approach. We had the Ethnic Center of Excellence, we had the Multicultural Business Development Organization, and it led to consistently and consistently getting results. And oftentimes, that was linked to the person who was in the chair. If the person in the chair was Black or multicultural, we made progress. If not, we lost some focus. So while working to drive more accountability across the enterprise inside the walls of P&G, we had to get to work to start accelerating progress externally outside the walls of P&G. And Leela will share some of those lessons.
Thanks, Andrea. All right, I'll try to keep my hair and my skirt down, but we'll see what we do here. All right, so one of the first ways that our commitment to making a difference came to life was through two films, The Talk and The Look. And what those films really did was make those conversations that we were having internally external and show the real life impact that can happen from unconscious bias. So the intention of The Talk was to show the real conversations that Black mothers have to have with their children to prepare them for the realities of racism in America. And I guarantee you those are different conversations than white mothers are having with their kids. The Look took a different angle. It showed the biases and microaggressions that Black men experience every single day in America and quite honestly in other parts of the world. So we really took a look at bringing that work to life, and what was critical as we were doing that was two things. We needed deep insights about the lived Black experience, but we also had to be working with the right creative partners. So we're gonna take a look at the films and then we'll come back and talk a bit about it.
Who said that?
The lady at the store.
That is not a compliment.
Listen,
It's an ugly, nasty word, and you are going to hear it. Nothing I can do about that. But you are not going to let that word hurt you. You hear me?
There are some people who think you don't deserve the same privileges just because of what you look like. It's not fair. It's not.
Remember, you can do anything they can. Difference is you gotta work twice as hard and be twice as smart.
Come straight home after practice. You got your ID? Oh, guess they stopped you.
How's your review?
We're good.
You good?
Yeah,
You see?
we're good.
Okay.
Good.
Now, when you get pulled over,
I'm a good driver. Okay?
baby,
Don't worry.
this is not about you getting a ticket. This is about you not coming home.
I'm gonna be okay. Right? Okay.
It's not fair. But you keep showing up.
You are not pretty for a black girl. You are beautiful, period. Okay? Don't ever forget that.
All right, so I talked before about selecting the right partners really being critical to the work, and you can see in there the level of insight and nuances that is in that work is absolutely critical to do well. So for the talk, we partnered with Agami, who is our multicultural communications agency. Some of our partners are here today. And BBDO, who was an experienced production partner. For the look, we partnered with the Saturday Morning Group. We really worked hard on the teams that brought this life to work to foster an environment of transparency and trust, because we had to make sure that everybody could speak freely. Like watching those films, I can see the hours we spent in rooms going back and forth on the wording and the scenes. So that partnership is critical. The other thing we had to do was to approach our potential critics to see how they were going to react to this work. Not to get them to agree, that wasn't our mission, they didn't have to agree with us, but we needed to understand how we were going to approach the conversation so that we could have maximum impact. And to be quite honest, the feedback was brutal at some times, it was blunt, but it was the real talk that we needed to hear to get this work right. This is a very different narrative than people had seen from a consumer products company before. It was critical that we struck the right balance. So many times people will look at this work and say the target was Black America. Of course, we wanted the work to resonate with Black Americans, but what we really wanted to do was to spark a level of introspection in white America to get them to understand and think about the unintended impact of bias. So what we were trying to do with this work is to spark awareness and conversation, because what we found at Procter & Gamble is that if we can spark a conversation, that conversation leads to understanding, understanding leads to empathy, and empathy is what drives action. So that is exactly what we were trying to do. The next part was really learning through testing. Testing was critical in this to get it right, and it was very, very iterative in the way that we did it. We sliced this research very finely. We talked to different political groups. We talked to rural America. We talked to urban America. We talked to different ages, races, ethnicities. We also spent a lot of time with Black Twitter, which, for those of you who know, Black Twitter can be a scary place. But they were very, very helpful as we were looking at how we were going to do this. So we knew that we were challenging some pretty significant societal norms, and we knew that we were doing the right thing. But we also knew that when we dropped this film, there was going to be an impact and some balance and some backlash. So the testing really helped us to understand and be prepared for what we were going to see. But what we saw as a result of this body of work, one of the big benefits to P&G is that we were able to establish credibility with the Black community, which allowed us to establish some really meaningful relationships. And what that did is give us the right to have future conversations about the Black experience that we would have over time. And then summer of 2020 hit, and we released The Choice. So you'll see a bit of a screenshot of it here. You can find that online a little bit later, look it up. But what we realized was during that summer of 2020 is it wasn't enough to just be anti-racist. What The Choice does was to encourage others to use their influence, to use their power to drive change. And that was really our first rallying cry for allyship. So it was also at this time that many of our brands during that summer of 2020 wanting to jump into the conversation to support Black consumers, which is normally a great thing, but that was something that some of our brands had never done before. And if you do that inauthentically, there can be a lot of backlash for a brand, right? It can hurt the brand's equity. So what we needed to do was to give the brand some rigor and a way to look at where they were on their inclusivity journey. It wasn't meant to judge them for where they were or chastise progress. It really was trying to give them a way to get started with the work. So we created something called the 4R framework. So I'll take you through that in just a second. But while we first used this with Black consumers, this is really a framework that can be used for any diverse consumer group. So the first R is reach. Brands needed to look at, was their media reaching their diverse consumer targets? Now, we'd love for this to be done at reach levels that are upwards of 80, 90%. Mark would argue 100%, but you really need to make sure that your messaging is reaching those targets at high levels. So reach, that's the first R. The second R is representation. So you should ensure that the diversity in your ads is at least proportionate to the population that you're trying to target. And then you need to make sure that how you're representing consumers in those ads is accurate and aspirational. And guess what one of the best ways to go about making sure that that happens is? It's making sure that you've got diversity on your brand teams and diversity in your agency partners. Doing that work is so much easier if you've done that. The third R is relevance. And this is really about understanding your consumer at a deep level. That means you're doing the research with her. We call it jobs to be done. What are the jobs to be done that she's looking for your product to do for her? So using the example of Black women and skin. So we know Black women, anti-aging is not our first concern, right? We all have heard that Black don't crack, right? But I will say it will crumble, so SPF please, especially while you're here, right? But we're much more interested in skin luminosity, even skin tone, hyperpigmentation. But you would never know that, right? You just make the assumption that all women are equally concerned about anti-aging. So that research is critical. Then the final R is resonance. So we have data that shows that ads score better and inspire more trust when they are in media resonant contexts, which are your Black owned and operated media outlets. So make sure that you're placing your ads in those contexts. And resonance is also about showing support for the community always. Don't just talk about it, be about it. And that was one of the things when we were going through the summer of 2020 that Damon said, if you're not taking some action, you don't get to speak, right? Always making sure that you're showing up correctly. So I'm now going to show a piece of creative that kind of shows all the 4 R's brought together. So this is a piece of content that we did for one of our hair care brands, My Black is Beautiful, in partnership with Cartwright. And what you'll see in the work is it demonstrates a level of penetration of Black women and their hair, how we feel about that. But then it was also about how we brought the work to life. We aired the ad, broke the ad first on the NAACP Image Awards. We partnered with the BET Her Awards. We partnered with the Black Hair Experience in Atlanta and aired the work on a myriad of Black-owned and operated channels. So here's the work.
They tell women like us that we need to become. That reward is there for us if we become patient enough. We'll find love if we become desirable enough, manageable enough. That our hair is something that needs to be done. They tell women like us that beautiful is something we become, when really, beautiful is something we have always been. When we unravel ourselves, we are free to define beauty as who we are. Unbecoming. What's unbecoming of a Black woman is becoming who you are.
All right, the last thing I want to talk about today is true and truer insights. So you saw on one of the previous slides that the 4R framework is a circle, and that is done very purposely because we want brands to stay on that learning journey, especially for insights, constantly going deeper and learning with the consumer. And that sweet spot is really about finding an insight that is true with all of your consumer targets, but is especially true for the diverse target that you're going after, and that's what we call true and truer. But it didn't stop there for us. The next step was integrating it into the brand ecosystems, internally and externally, and Eric's going to talk to us about that.
So coming off of 2020, we wanted to raise the bar. We have built up some incredible trust and empathy with these programs that Leela just shared and Andre shared, but it was time to raise the bar as we went into 2021. But there was one thing that we discovered. When we're ready to invest in Black media, we discovered that the media ecosystem isn't really broken. It was actually designed and built that way. It was built for the general market. And let's think about this. Systems by nature are designed to sustain themselves. And if something, and especially if it makes money, you keep doing it. So that's where we are. It was leaving out a lot of the smaller and multicultural publishers in the ecosystem. So let's take Black-owned operated media, for example. In many cases, there's limited investment for creators to create programming content, which actually limits the audiences and the reach that our brands need to grow. So it wasn't just a spending problem, it was an ecosystem problem. And we had to start at the core. So P&G, as one of the world's largest advertisers, we have a significant responsibility to lead the charge to rebuild the ecosystem that will allow for greater inclusion and market growth. And we realized that if we could just start to repair these ecosystems, we could potentially achieve the representation that reflects the full breadth and body of the consumers that we serve. And we could turn this effort into an engine of growth for P&G and for the industry. So to start this, to fix this system, we had to really get down and deep into the core and really understand what are the disparities in the ecosystem. But there's 3 things that underpin some of our learnings. The first one is around creators. So less than 6% of US film producers of US films are Black. And if you look at it from a Black woman perspective, less than 1% are Black women. Also, if you look at the programming, 2/3 of black consumers don't see themselves accurately portrayed on screen. And then the last kicker, 2%, actually less than 2% of US ad dollars are spent on black targeted media. So hearing that, those big three disparities really underpin the problem that we were trying to solve. So understanding that, we had to put ourselves into action. And this action would manifest itself across marketers, agencies, production crews, media companies. This commitment started with a thought around equal representation and ambition that every link in the creative and media supply chains represent greater representation. That's why we launched Widen the Screen. It's an expansive content creation, talent development, and partnership platform that expresses the full joy, beauty, and vastness of the black experience. Our immediate focus is on black creators, but our intention is to expand this program across Hispanic, Asian Pacific Islander, Native, LGBTQ, and indigenous communities. So we won't just stop at black consumers, we're gonna expand this across all communities. And this program was founded on a fundamental call to action to widen the screen so we can widen our view by portraying the full joy, beauty, and vastness of black life, not simply representing the black community between two extremes, extreme struggle or extreme excellence. Let's take a look at a film that actually launched during the Image Awards in 2021.
If you think you know what happens next, ask yourself why. These are the black stories we've been shown. A narrow view that limits our understanding. But there's so much more to see. The full picture of black life. Let's widen the screen so we can widen our view.
I think Mahershala Ali really brought that film to life. And that insight there was really a creative transformation of 2/3 of consumers don't accurately see themselves portrayed on screen. So we want to move into the other areas. Widen the Screen program includes the Queen Collective, which is one of our signature programs under Widen the Screen. This is in partnership with Queen Latifah, Flavor Unit Entertainment, and Tribeca Studios, and it opens the doors for black women directors and their crews through mentorship, production support, and distribution. In the 4 years that we've had the Queen Collective, we've produced over 14 films, which has been truly outstanding for us. And our intent is to take those films and put those films on black-owned and operated platforms to create media inventory. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But also, it enabled new creators into the ecosystem. But with these 14 films, we developed partnerships with black and Hispanic and Asian and Native and indigenous companies. And we formed these partnerships in a way that we have over the years with broadcasters and production crews. But with Widen the Screen and together with these partners, we're co-developing more resonant programming that accurately portrays the multidimensional Black experience. So in doing so, we're actually building out new media inventory for brands to buy, for brands to be in and around. And this process expands the multicultural media ecosystem. And this is establishing new habits in terms of how we generate insights, how we bring in new partners into the distribution model, and we tap new creators to create this market growth. And we want to be the #1 advertiser in Black media, but to significantly expand the size of this ecosystem to drive market growth. But the problem is there's not enough programming in the ecosystem. And as we talked before, if you take about multicultural as a whole, less than 5% of the media that is invested in multicultural owned and operated inventory is just not there. So we have to go build that. That means that we have to partner, we have to step up, and we have to bring other partners into the ecosystem. So we got many of our partners in here tonight, AURN, from a media perspective, we got Group Black, we got Stellar TV, we got BET, so we're trying to bring these partners into the ecosystem to expand it, and also bring creators into the ecosystem. But we have to actually lead the disruption. We have to lead the charge to create these new habits. The other thing that we have to do is fix this with technology as well. So we have to bring our tech partners into the platform. Mark and I met with the trade desk earlier today just to reinforce the point around multicultural inclusion. This is not a platform that we continue to invest in the majority, in the big Disneys and all the bigger platforms, but we have to be inclusive of how we expand this market growth. We have partners like Reset Digital, bringing new SSPs into the ecosystem so that we not only be inclusive in our media purchasing and buying, but this also creates jobs for those companies, which actually creates market growth and buying power for our consumers to purchase our products. So with that, and all this partnership model, we now have the model. We want to drive it down to our brands. I'm going to let Andrea come back and give you some examples of how we're widening the screen across our brands.
So, how are we bringing this to life? I think one of the important things that we saw, particularly for one of our biggest brands, Old Spice, right, our biggest global brand, is that we learned that we weren't winning with Black men. And how did we learn that? Because they told us. We spent time with consumers in their homes, at their jobs, at music festivals, at sporting events, and really got to know them at a very intimate level. And so it was important for us to understand what was going to be necessary to really win with these Black men. And I think one of the important things that we came to learn is that our content that we were putting out into the world simply was not resonating with Black men, right? They didn't see themselves represented in the work, and they also didn't see their culture represented in the work. Our humor, to a certain degree, was brash and loud and out of touch, and really missed the mark. So as we got to work with these consumers and helped us find ways, our new gateways, to help understand how do we win with them in a more relevant way, a more authentic way, so they could actually see themselves in the work. I think one of the core insights that we found around Old Spice was we learned, I think, very quickly that how Black men present themselves to the world really matters, because the world doesn't always see them as who they are. They see Black first, and they think Black first. So it's like we talked earlier, we had to continue to go deeper and deeper to understand not only what mattered to them in their lives, but also what mattered to them from a category standpoint in order to address this. So how do we repair it to build a new strategic approach for our Old Spice iconic brand? We really got in touch with what mattered to Black men through storytelling. We brought to life his standards for when it comes to personal care. But we didn't abandon the sense of humor for Old Spice for our new campaign, Men Have Skin Too. We actually used humor to bring a more sophisticated, elevated humor to the lens of a Black man with their personal care, and with Old Spice products that have amazing benefits that even women won't believe that they're not for them. One of the most pleasant things that we learned on this journey with Old Spice is that we found when we really go deeper on those insights, those truer and truer insights that Leila talked about, particularly with one multicultural group, we actually find that the executions are broadly appealing for all consumers. In creating Men Have Skin Too, not only have we accelerated our household penetration with Black men, but we've also grown our household penetration with multicultural men. And guess what? We've also grown our share with white men too. So here's the lesson. Never, never be apologetic about championing your brands to be inclusive. This is a business strategy, not a D&I project, so please keep that firmly on your mind throughout the process. The data tells us this is how we're winning with P&G. Our business is growing through multicultural, and even as we look back on this current fiscal year, a significant percentage of our growth, our business growth, is coming from multicultural. So having Black people in your advertising is not enough. Representation is just a baseline. It's insufficient on its own. When you actually build inclusion into the very fabric of how you build your brands, as you've seen here today in the depth and breadth of work with Widen the Screen, you'll arrive at those same insights and drive greater authenticity. Let's take a look at Men Have Skin Too.
What are you doing?
I just got some new Old Spice body washes for myself.
Those aren't for you, those are for me.
Relax.
Relax?
With lavender.
Look, this Old Spice stuff, it's for men.
This body wash is for you.
Yeah.
No, I thought...
What are you doing? It's for men.
No.
We've seen such massive and expansive growth behind this campaign with Old Spice, and we've actually taken this same blueprint, this campaign, and extended across multicultural groups at large. So, finally, what I'll say here is when we actually tell authentic stories, we actually allow our audience and our consumers to let their guard down and to welcome them into the brand. When we do this really, really well, we actually build a deeper connection and loyalty with our brand consumers. And this journey continues with all of our consumer segments. And to close this out, I'll turn it over to Damon.
All right, thank you, team. At the beginning, we talked about wanting to win and wanting to be number one. And you see throughout what we presented today that this is really about authentically connecting, understanding, and serving consumers, both inside the company and in our brands, but understanding what steps we need to take along each side of this journey. So what we now want to do, candidly, is I'll show up a slide that summarizes the lessons that we have here today so that you see them recapping with where Andrea started, looking at the hard data really hard, penetrating it to understand what it says about each and every consumer group, deeply understanding the Black experience. You can do that really well when you have great representation in your company. I'm sorry, I'm going the other way there. Creating cultural familiarity inclusively, and then building it into the business with accountability. Outside the company, understanding the Black experience, creating a model. In our case, it was the 4R model. You may have a different framework that works in your company, but what allows everyone to come along that journey, understand what works, what doesn't, and how do you constantly make that system bigger and better. And then truer and truer insights. When you can win with one consumer group, it creates a shadow so you can win with alls. And then getting into the system, recognizing where you frankly need to give room for your people to work outside of the system. We oftentimes say, well, these are the steps. Well, sometimes those steps need to be a little bit differently for certain consumer groups. Constructively disrupting and rebuilding with new habits. We talked about Black-owned media. What do we need to do to not just say, this is what Black-owned media needs to do differently? What do we need to do differently to win with Black-owned media? And then again, partnering with others along the journey. This has been our roadmap. As I mentioned, the journey is far from over. We're still on it, and we're constantly getting better. One of the goals that we set for coming here this week was to constantly learn what's happening out there, what can we pick up from others, but also to share with you what we're doing so that you can give us feedback, you can make us better, and we can really grow the pie together. So that's it for the formal part of our presentation. We now have a few minutes to engage and hear your questions, your thoughts, and no question is off limits. So please join us. We have a question in the final row back there. Please maybe come up to the front and we'll have a microphone runner. Not sure we've got our microphone runner. I'll grab this mic here and we'll use that one. We'll trade.
thanks very much, and thank you for being so generous and sharing all this great information. So you talked about really looking at the data, and obviously these were very clear business decisions that you made. But what we know is that very often our folks internally don't hear the data, read the data, believe the data, whatever. So did you have to have a conversation about why we're going to become this brand that focuses on the Black community versus another community or all lives matter and whatnot?
Yeah, I'll start and then maybe I'll ask Andre to chime in with the thought. Going back to 2016, when we said we needed to have a new focus, we were very deliberate in saying this is a company strategy. We didn't have anyone else in the company lead the discussion on that strategy other than the CEO, right? And so we, again, being a data-driven company, at that presentation, we literally put up a chart that said, let me talk to you about the reality of our Black employees. This is how many we recruit. This is the rate at which we promote. This is the rate at which they leave. We put that data up and said everyone in the company gets to see the data. We did the same thing on the business when we looked at shares and household penetration for our brands. And we brought everyone in the room and we said, Tide, here's where you're at. Pampers, here's where you're at. Olay's where you're at. So we made it transparent and we made it okay to talk about it. But we drove accountability down throughout the organization. And so if I look out at this room, we've got head of our beauty business, head of our Pampers business. A number of our businesses here, they were the people that had to look at their own data and their own employees could ask them questions. So tell me what we're going to do to make progress on it. So I think that is what helped us normalize the conversation. Mark, you want to add, or Andre, you want to add?
Well, what I would add to that is that it's an ongoing conversation, and it never stops. And if you let up on it for a moment, it will drift back. We've talked about habits. The 4 R's are habits. We have some other habits of how to build our business among Black consumers and all multicultural consumers, because you have to change the habits. Because the habits that we've grown up with in building businesses is to build business with the averages, not with the eaches. And so that requires a change in mindset, that there is no general market, there's a multicultural market. That the only way you can get growth is by driving your multicultural business. You have to change your research so it's inclusive research. You have to change your reach strategy so it's among all consumers, not on an average basis. You have to change your advertising strategy, which means you need to change your agency strategy, which is your creative strategy. You have to go out and buy Black-owned media and recognize that there's a systemic depth of change that needs to occur. So it is a constant education. And what we have found is we just keep embedding it and embedding it and embedding it. I will be very clear, it's really important to ensure that you get all senior management involved. You know, Alex Keith, our CEO of Beauty, is here. She's here because she's committed to it, because she understands it. And so we have our much number of business leaders that are here. We've put a full-time job with Leela and with Eric and with Andrea on dealing with this, plus other people. And it's not very important. It is everyone's job. It can't be just the Black community's job. And what I would say has made a big difference is reaching out and getting champions. We literally celebrate champions. We just had a ceremony where we celebrated new champions. And there were white champions, Hispanic champions who are helping in this area. When you do that, it becomes part of the fabric, and therefore it's not a conversation in a microcosm, it's a conversation everywhere.
Hey, Damon, the only thing I would just build to the point of the data is that you have to keep the data in front of you, right? It's not a one and done, it's not a point in time exercise. We continually look at our employee data, we continually look at our share data, our equity data to understand how we're resonating with consumers and maybe where we still have some gaps. So I think that continual learning is critical to ensure that we are really getting to the insights that'll help us really strengthen our brand plans.
Thank you for the question. Other questions?
Gentlemen, thank you for this informative session. My friend, and ladies, I'm sorry. You first. Damon, a few years ago, you guys went on a campaign, PR, and you were talking about some of the brilliant African-American, mostly women, scientists you have there, particularly doing some incredible work in beauty. So I was at BDO, blackdoctor.org at the time, and we did a beauty event, and actually we recognized Rikisha Thompson. Talk in terms of the talent and the opportunity for our young people through media to see the kind of careers that they can have above and beyond sports and entertainment.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about where we're at, one of the things we've tried to do is to celebrate, as Mark mentioned, all of the people that are along the journey. The My Back is Beautiful brand, and maybe Lita will talk about this, really was founded by black women so that they could reset the standards of beauty. Fundamental to that was making sure we had black women scientists throughout that, and really having the right people in the room and showing them and showing the world who we had inside of the company and how their lived experience really was a big part of that. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the journey of MBIB.
Yeah, so I think it's exactly what Damon said. With black women in our hair, there's a common belief that if you don't have it, you don't know it, right? And that you need to have hair of that type to be able to formulate products that are truly going to work. And we have that. And that's a point of pride, I think, for P&G, that who is behind our multicultural textured hair brands are black women that are designing for it. And they speak at HBCUs. We have TikTok channels. Everything that shows who's behind the brands, but also for the very specific purpose of showing young girls through STEM that there are other things that they can be in life. And that's a mission that a lot of our scientists have.
Yes, fourth row back here.
Thank you again, all panelists and audience members, for your attention as well. A quick question really about the balance between communicating the issues of today versus imagining the possibilities of tomorrow, right? A large part of art, you're endorsing or challenging, right, the status quo, and then taking those challenges and those conversations and putting it in digestible mediums. So clearly the amazing work that's been done already, a large part talks about the issues that plague Black America today, the issues that have systemically created a lot of the conditions alive right now. I'm curious P&G's model in terms of balancing what has been done already and then imaginative creativity for tomorrow, right? How do you go between the two and make space for obviously what's existing now that creates our current lived conditions, but also bring in new ideas, right? The similar mantra, you know, the Jordan Peele of tomorrow, right? How do you bring up the newness in the creative collaboration?
I'll jump in with one thought, then I'll turn it over to my colleagues. I mean, one of the things that I oftentimes talk about is it's important that we read the room, right? Understand what consumers are talking about, and then making sure we're connecting through their eyes, right? So the talk actually started from consumer research about Black women's beauty, right? And when we got into that, what we understood, the most important thing to a Black woman was her child, right? And so, yes, I was concerned about all these things, but I really wanted my child to be there. And when you're having that authentic conversation, you've kind of got to be led through consumers, right? So I think, you know, you look at what was happening in the world. I mean, Charlottesville, all of those things, the time was ripe and right for us to have that conversation. Today, that conversation's different, right? Doesn't mean that we can't have it, but we need to connect it back into what's happening today. But I'll open it up to thoughts from the...
I think you make a great point, and I think that's one of the purposes of our Queen Collective program, because those are young creators, and their view of the world and what the world can be is quite different than some of the views that we have, right? So they're making pieces of content and films for us that are about that future for, not even future, the now is here, right? In terms of the brighter future that we will all have. And I think it's another example of the unbecoming work that My Black is Beautiful did. My Black is Beautiful in the past was always about highlighting bias and stereotypes, right? But Black women are doing it now, right? Supreme Court justices, vice presidents. We can be whatever. We're Black for us. And so starting to tell some of those different stories about, again, a lived Black experience that is very different than what we've had in the past.
Yeah, I'll build. Leela stole my thunder on Queen Collective, but I'll add some more examples here. I think the question is around seeing around corners and making sure that our efforts have lasting impact going forward. Queen Collective is a phenomenal example where we're tapping up-and-coming creators. The other thing is Adrian kicked off on stage how we're starting to bring more young black creators to Cannes. So we sponsored, you know, the 5 to 10 creators that we brought here and continue to develop them and on other platforms. Leal and I are partnering on HBCU. We're underrepresented in terms of our black employees, the young talent that's managing our brands. So we're putting together an HBCU program, really a focused effort. We expanded our schools to 5 schools. We're going to be on those campuses connecting with those consumers and helping them throughout their academic, but also their professional career, and even in technology. So as Mark and I mentioned, we're looking around the corners. We know that a lot of our multicultural publishers are not connected in programmatically. We see the data in terms of where the trends are heading. The whole discussion around here has been about AI. Things will be automated. Things will have machine learning. So we got to make sure that we raise the infrastructure, the technology infrastructure with our publishers to be prepared for that evolution where media will be bought automatically. So if you're not connected technically, you're going to be left behind. So those are a couple things that I think we're seeing around the corners and making sure that our efforts will be more systemic in the future.
I want to double down on read the room. This is something that Damon has said before, which is a very, very important point, particularly since we're all in business in one way, shape, or form. You know, in 2017, 2018, that was a context where it was time to get a point out around the black experience. And it was important for us to do that just to have any level of credibility whatsoever. And so that was one of the reasons why the talk. And then, frankly, after the talk, we had Jeff Edwards from Saturday Morning say, "Hey, you missed black men." So, okay, we got the look. And then when 2020 hit, we did the choice. The time was right to do that. Today's conditions are different. Today's conditions are more polarizing and divisive than ever. So what's important is for us to really ensure, and for all of us, is to ensure that we're very insightful and figure out where can we make the biggest difference. What is it in our business that can allow us to make the biggest difference, particularly now? In our business right now, we can help change the media ecosystem, the creative and media ecosystem. Why? We're a huge advertiser. We have advertising dollars. So creating those partnerships and building that is an obvious way for us to make a difference. Unpacking the system and realizing that because we don't have enough media inventory, because we don't have enough programming, because we don't have enough creators, we got to build that part. So that's another part. And basically spreading the word. This is why we're telling everybody, because we need more people to join that process. And then, importantly, what we do every day is serve the black community with our products. Who here brushes their teeth, washes their hair, uses laundry detergent, right? There's everyday products that what we're about is serving the black consumers. And this is where I think we can have a huge impact, and where every business can have a huge impact. Understand black consumers and what their needs are. Ellen Seagraves is here from our family care business, which is Charmin, Bounty, and Puffs. They have one of the biggest opportunities for growth, and so is Stacy Rearman right here. So they've identified a gigantic opportunity. And you think, wait a minute, toilet paper, paper towels? When they started digging into consumer needs, realized what were the differences. We got a great Bounty commercial that shows a spill cleanup. When they went into black homes, what did they see? Okay, I wash my hands, I dry it off with a paper towel. Then I wipe the counter. Then I wipe the refrigerator. Then I wipe the stove. Then I wipe the little stain on the floor, and then I toss it into the wastebasket. That's a whole big difference in terms of thinking about that. That's going to be worth a lot of growth. But it's also going to serve the black consumer better. Every business, if you can focus on your wheelhouse and do that, we can all make a huge difference. And frankly, that will drive growth. And when you drive growth, you drive economic inclusion, you make the market bigger, and it's better for everyone. That's how we can make an even bigger impact together.
Great. Got time for 2 more questions.
Hello. My name is Courtney Jones. I lead business development at the Martin Agency, and I'm a CCDC volunteer this year. I think you guys have built and are continuing to build really a playbook on inclusion accountability, which is incredible. On the agency side, obviously we hear a lot of pressures about making sure that we have the representation on our side and in the work. And I'm curious, just because you guys are on the brand side and have done such a great job, what advice would you give to agencies about pushing back on their clients or brand partners about having that inclusion and accountability and representation on their end? So that way we're really building that accountability and representation on both sides.
I think it's a great question. Thank you. And maybe each of us can give a tip.
Quick one. I'll go
Mark,
quick,
start.
and I'd love you to join. Step one. Ask for equal and inclusive representation across the entire creative and media supply chain. Starts in your own company, needs to go to your agencies. Then it goes to your media companies. Then it goes to your other partners. When you walk into a room as a client, if you look around the room, and if you see homogeneity in terms of a number of white faces, and you don't see something, a diversity that's proportional to the population, stop the meeting. I can remember a very important meeting with one of our agencies, where I said, where are the black and Hispanic and Asian people in this meeting? That may be why this storyboard reflects the lack of diversity that it does. I did that one time. The word spread pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing you can do.
Yeah, I'll give an example. When we did Widen the Screen, it was during the COVID period. And Mark is exactly right. Ask the question to your agency. I think the first meeting, when we saw the screen, we were like, this is not going to work. So we asked the question to make have more diverse representation on the screen. And I'm talking about during COVID, so I got 9 boxes on the screen looking at the creative team. That second time they came back, it was a sea of diversity. And the insights got deeper and deeper. And we, on the first call, we went a completely different direction. I don't know if you remember this on Widen the Screen. And then the second time when we had more diverse on the screen, we went a completely different direction. And that's the output that you saw. So you got to ask the question, and you got to see the diverse creative team to get the truer and truer insights.
And I think it's also looking at how is the copy scoring, right? If it is not built by people who understand the nuances and the insights, it's not going to score as well as copy that does. And I would have that just honest discussion. And if the copy scores aren't there, have a discussion about share or household penetration and what's really needed to go after those numbers.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Leela. I think one of the things that we continue to be reminded of as we work with our agency partners, if the lack of representation is not in the room, it makes it a much harder challenge to get to the quality of what we're trying to develop in terms of the effectiveness, right, and the authenticity of the content. So having that representation gets us to the speed and the quality of the storytelling much faster and in a more authentic way.
Yeah. The last point, or maybe before Mark comes back, the point that I'd make, because it sounds very easy to say that, the thing I would encourage you to do is to create space for that conversation. One of the things that's oftentimes difficult to do is you're in the midst of the work, and then you realize why we're kind of off track. Literally have that conversation in a part of an annual plan, as part of an annual review, and it cannot be the most junior or the black person or the Hispanic person or the gay person or whatever it is, right? That's the job of the leader. And one of the things that I've realized is when I would ask questions, and I'm pick on, I saw Anitra out here earlier, it's like, well, talk to me about your team, and she's, yeah, I'm asking. I'm like, that's not Anitra's job. That's my job, well, you know, to go in and say, okay, great, let me talk to the president of the agency, right? Because sometimes, you know, it's a little tense at the junior level, and when you've got the black person that's got to raise their hand, it can be uncomfortable. So I say that to my white brothers and sisters that are out here. If you're in a leading role, or if you're black and if you're in a leading role, why don't you lead that conversation? Because too many times it rests on the black or the gay or the woman, whoever it is, to have that conversation. Lead that conversation. You'd be amazed at the space that it creates to happen.
That's where I wanted to go further on that. You and I are obviously a Vulcan mind meld, because it's really important that our white brothers and sisters, our gay brothers and sisters, our black brothers and sisters reach out to each other and have a conversation. Establish a partnership, establish a champion. The privilege that I have is working with these folks up here and many more who have helped educate me. But that's because I opened the conversation up. I took the chance to ask questions. After the talk, Monica Turner, who is our president of North America, we showed Monica the talk. She said, you're disrespecting black men. Why? Because there's two black men in there. They don't say a word. They're behind the scenes. I pulled Damon aside. I said, Damon, talk to me. I have no idea what you're talking about. So he helped explain it to me and understand what that meant. You know, you're reinforcing the stereotype of the absent father. Okay, gotcha. Okay, when we did the look, we had me and white people in the room. The first cut we saw, I said, there is no way that any white person that sees that is going to accept it, because they're going to feel that you are calling them a racist. And by the way, that woman that was at the beginning there, where you saw in terms of the car, said, remember having this conversation with Eric and Damon saying, I don't think white people think that they're that obvious. And he said, well, that's what you think. I said, okay, point taken. But here's the deal. If we show it that way, they will reject it because they don't think they're that obvious. So we need to dial this thing down to make sure it's going to be accepted. There were certain scenes in there as like, ooh, whoa, we got to be careful. But that's the important part of having your white brothers and sisters in the room, having the discussion and creating the safe space that enables you to be able to do that. And then that's where you start getting bold. Then that's where you start doing things like the choice. Or when unbecoming, when Leela and I were talking about, along with Alex, hey, we have got to get some awareness of unbecoming. What are we going to do? Let's do an ad. Great. Who do we got? How about Keith Cartwright, Saturday morning, who did The Choice and did Widen the Screen? Let's get his team. And what did we see? A full, that was the full, Leela said that the creatives there said, Leela said, this is the first time I've never had to explain about black hair to anybody. They all understood it. So, long way of saying, this is everybody's ground game. And so establish the partnerships between each other. Create the open conversations. Have the side conversations because it's a little uncomfortable, but be daring to do it because everybody here wants to do the right thing. They just need the opening to make that happen.
Great. Is there one final question? In the back here, please come forward.
Hello. I was really interested by that nugget that you guys shared about how you're using this work as almost like the vanguard, that you're then going to roll it out, you know, to Asian and Native and all that. I thought that was really interesting, especially because the Old Spice ads, the new Asian ones, I love those. Could you talk a little bit about how you can use that and these efforts within your organization to say this isn't just about a black thing. This is about a game changer. And you talked about going from the average to the every. Like, that's really interesting. Could you talk a little bit about how you're using this as the engine for change?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think, once we started to get really great feedback and engagement on that original Men Have Skin Too campaign, I think it really helped us to be more courageous, quite frankly, in terms of how do we approach our consumer learning. And really in a way that we could go deeper by each consumer group and understand like what was really important to them from a skincare regimen, from a personal care regimen. And we found nuanced insights by consumer segment. But fundamentally, there were some universal truths in terms of what mattered to men and how they want to share their space, if you will, their products, with other people in the home. And so I do think the cultural context does matter in this, and you're only going to get the cultural context where you're actually spending time with consumers in their homes, in their places where they move. And one of the things with the APA campaign that we learned was this interesting dynamic between the spouse and the mother or the mother-in-law, right? And so we spent some time with our internal employee APA resource groups to help us really kind of fine-tune the language and how do we think about the storytelling. And then we started to work with our agencies to really build out that body of work. But my point in saying that is the effort and the intention around spending time with each and every consumer group, one, helps you get to the universal truths, then you can kind of nuance and authentically bring to life for each of those campaigns.
And Andrea is being modest because Andrea created a program called Diversity Beyond Numbers, which applied diversity to every part of our strategy. Our strategy is to have superior performing products, superior performing packaging, superior performing communication, retail execution, and value. And what Andrea created was a program that takes businesses through to go through every one of those components and build that out. That was building upon the 4 Rs and the multicultural habits, and so we're trying to institutionalize that work. By the way, that ad was done by an all-Asian agency. PCA, Giancarlo Pacheco. It's another way to do this thing. He's in the house. All right, there he is. All right, good. That's how you make the difference.
And then I'll just lastly build, like all of our categories and brands develop those playbooks. So the playbook that's been at the corporate level that Old Spice has done, other brands are now developing. Their target could be USH, could be APA, but really it gets down to what Mark just talked about, the vectors of superiority of your brand put together with the insights and depth and how those are going to work true and truer across all. So we really pushed it down to all levels of the company.
I'll close by pointing you to where you guys can learn more. Obviously, you can visit pg.com/widen the screen or use the QR code. But if you visit our YouTube page at Procter & Gamble, you'll see a vast body of work. We focus today on largely the Black experience being here at Inkwell. But we can talk about the journey on Asian Americans, right, through a film that we did called The Name that just won an Effie. We've got amazing films on the LGBTQ community. And again, part of these are not going by and just ticking off the box for the different groups. As we pointed out, built on deep, meaningful, true human insights, connected back in to the performance, value, and relevance of our brands. When you do that, right, and we make no apologies about trying to do good in the world and trying to grow our business at the same time. But what we've learned is you have to do both of those at the same time. This cannot be about doing a diversity thing to make people feel good. It can't be just about growing the business. But there is a real sweet spot when we do both. So on behalf of my team...
One more point.
One more point. Mark,
one more
close us
point.
out.
Don't keep going. But one more point, and it's not just America.
Correct.
It's everywhere. Okay, they're all in each everywhere, every market. So our Canadian team has picked this up and focused on French Canadian, Chinese Canadian, Southeast Asian Canadian. Our Brazil team has recognized that 50% of the population is black and brown, celebrating curly hair with Pantene, and now focusing on individual insights here. Our UK team, our Pantene Europe team, has done a brilliant job of focusing on black hair, Asian hair, Hispanic hair, Caucasian hair, as well as gray hair. People with disabilities, vision impaired, as well as LGBTQ+. So it's not just a U.S. opportunity, it's a worldwide opportunity. If we keep that in mind, we can widen the screen everywhere and widen opportunities. Damon, back to you.
Thank you all very much. Have a great day.